5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a pancreas condition that I had never heard anything about ever before, and the whole process and journey of getting diagnosed and dealing with this condition has been something that's been really isolating for me, and it's something that has caused a lot of trauma and a lot of anxiety, and it is something that's really difficult for me to talk about, which is why I haven't talked about it in length in like 5 years. But I am tired of the grip that pancreatic insufficiency has on me, and I'm going to share all about it. I'm going to share about what it is. I'm going to share how I was diagnosed. I'm going to share what my signs and symptoms were that tipped me off that something was wrong, / all of the very big missed symptoms I missed that should have tipped me off that something was wrong. And I'm going to be talking about my diagnosis story, because I just never was able to find a video like the one I'm going to make today talking about all of it from start to finish. And I do want to say just here at the beginning, I am planning to make an additional video talking about like what it looks like now, where I'm at with it, and what helps me in my day-to-day. But today's video, like I said, is going to be just explaining what pancreatic insufficiency is and my whole journey and experience with it, because there is so much, and pancreatic insufficiency is a condition in the GI system. So just as a disclaimer, I am going to be talking about my bowel habits, mainly because unfortunately the hallmark symptoms of pancreatic insufficiency have to do with bowel movements. And yeah, so just be forewarned about that, and know that that stuff is really hard for me to share, and I'm going to be a bit vulnerable, but I just have never been able to find anyone my age who has dealt with this. And so my hope for this video is that this will just become a resource and a support video so that you know you're not alone. And yeah, it's always good to have information out there. So with all of that said, let's get into the video. Okay, what is pancreatic insufficiency? So everyone has a pancreas, and I'm sure that most people are familiar with the pancreas being responsible for insulin production. But another thing the pancreas does is produce digestive enzymes. And what happens is if you're eating food, these digestive enzymes help to digest the food, absorb nutrients from food, and just kind of process it all within your body. It really just helps the rest of your GI system to work together. And when someone has pancreatic insufficiency, there is not enough of those digestive enzymes being produced. So when someone with pancreatic insufficiency is eating something, their body will not absorb the nutrients, and it's not going to digest the food and break it down. And because of that, food will typically go right through the affected individual completely without digesting, without being absorbed. So that is what pancreatic insufficiency is. Now, there are multiple causes for pancreatic insufficiency. The most known are individuals with cystic fibrosis, which is something I do not have. Another cause that some people experience is prolonged alcohol use can cause pancreatic insufficiency. Other people have autoimmune disorders. Other people have had chronic pancreatitis, and because of that, their pancreas is damaged from those attacks. And for other people, it's unexplained. For me, my pancreatic insufficiency is caused by pancreatic atrophy. Pancreatic atrophy just basically means that a part of my pancreas has died off and will never come back again. So that is the cause. But what caused my pancreatic atrophy? To my doctor's knowledge and expertise, he basically confirmed that my pancreatic atrophy was caused by mitochondrial disease, which I'm not going to get into. I have tons of videos on my YouTube channel all about mitochondrial disease, but it is my primary condition. It's a genetic condition where there's not enough energy for my body to work properly. So I've had a lot of health issues over the years, and he found in my genetics that I was predisposed to pancreas-related issues. So that best explains my pancreatic atrophy, which caused my pancreatic insufficiency. Now, how was I diagnosed with pancreatic insufficiency? So I was diagnosed with pancreatic insufficiency via a fecal elastase test. They took a sample of my stool, and the fecal elastase test came back abnormal. And then they ordered an MRCP, which is an MRI that is focused on the pancreas, liver, and bile ducts. And that showed my pancreatic atrophy and that is how I was diagnosed with a fecal elastase test. However, in explaining that, it sounds like it was very straightforward and simple. No, it was not. And I will, after I start talking about all of my symptoms, I will get into everything that occurred trying to get a diagnosis. So, what are the hallmark symptoms I was mentioning in the beginning of this video? The hallmark symptoms of pancreatic insufficiency are greasy, foul-smelling stools that also float and that will not flush very easily. For me, I also dealt with stools that smelled a lot like bile, so there was a lot of bile involved. Those are like the typical hallmark symptoms. A lot of other people experience abdominal cramping, and that is not something I experienced in the beginning, but since my diagnosis, it is something that I experience if I ever eat something that I'm not tolerating. But in the beginning, I didn't really deal with cramping, but I did have those very loose, foul-smelling stools, and it's also stools that are uncontrollable in nature. It did not matter what I ate, how little, how much, it went straight through me, and it just was awful, and I was in the bathroom more than I was anywhere else. So those are like the hallmark symptoms, but I also mentioned at the beginning of this video that pancreatic insufficiency can cause malnutrition and malabsorption, and because of that, I did have a whole host of other symptoms that signified something was really wrong. So I have a list on my phone of all of my symptoms, and the biggest symptom was that me, my family, my doctors, we all just kind of assumed that I had a progression of mitochondrial disease, and I won't get too much into it. Again, I have more videos about this on my channel, but essentially what that would have meant is that if I had truly had a progression of mitochondrial disease, it would mean that my body was producing less energy than it already does, which my body doesn't produce enough energy on its own. So that's essentially what a progression would mean. And the reason why we thought I had a progression of mito was because I was just unable to do more than one thing in a week. It did not matter what it was. And I just kept being bedridden more and more often and kept being unable to go out places, to church or to school or to meet with friends. It just kept getting worse and worse to where I was bedridden. And this is something that a lot of mitochondrial disease patients have experienced as a progression. And that's why we all thought that's what it was. So that was the biggest thing, is just the amount of fatigue, the level of fatigue was so extreme that it was impacting my quality of life and my day-to-day. And I was just bedridden. I just got dizzy super quickly. Now I do have POTS. So I just assumed it was that. And to do with my blood pressure and heart rate, but those were like the biggest things. And I also always needed to eat, and I was never satiated. It's not even that I was like starving and ravenous constantly, it's that I literally never felt that satisfied, satiated feeling you do after you eat. I never felt like that. So it felt like I just needed to eat and eat and eat. And what I mean by that is eat protein to up my energy and help me get through the day. And that was something that was completely abnormal. It was just something that was weird. And looking back, I'm like, well, obviously that was a huge sign that my body wasn't getting the nutrients, but I didn't know it at the time. And I also kept losing weight. So the more I was eating, the more I was losing, which was something everyone around me noticed. My family noticed, my community noticed, it was commented on by multiple people, which, side note, please don't comment on other people's weight because you don't know where they're at or what's going on in their life. But yeah, I knew everyone was telling me I was losing weight, but I, for whatever reason, just didn't want to admit that or look into it. I guess I just didn't want to accept the fact that something was going on in my body. I really wish I could go back to old me and like slap myself in the face, but I can't do that. Another symptom is that I was bruising really easily, and I also, my mental health was just so bad. Now, I am someone who has dealt with anxiety. I am medicated for anxiety now. I have PTSD. I've struggled with depression. I am no stranger to struggling with my mental health. However, the way I struggled with my mental health before my diagnosis of pancreatic insufficiency was on a whole nother level, to the point I literally thought I had some sort of mood disorder or something, because my emotions were all over the place. I was crying myself to sleep every night. I was just not myself. Like, it was horrendous. The best way I can explain it is, imagine how you feel after you haven't slept all night and then you don't eat anything the next day. And you're just tired and exhausted and you're super hangry and your mental health is so low because of all of that. That's where my head was at. Did I confide in anybody? No. Again, I cannot explain my psyche. I do things much differently now, and that's all I can do is learn from my mistakes. But if you can't tell, I'm a little annoyed at my previous self from like 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. So all of these signs and symptoms were obviously indicating something was really, really wrong. But it is so much easier now to look back and put all of the puzzle pieces together. But you have to know and remember that all of these things happened over the span. The majority of these things happened over the span of like 6 months. So from September 2019 to March 2020 was the majority of all of these symptoms. And the reason I know that for sure is something I will get into, because I am now going to be talking about my diagnosis journey. Something to keep in mind. I have mitochondrial disease. Well, I already mentioned that. Okay. I have mito, and then I've had GI issues since childhood, so I'm no stranger to something being up with my GI system, but it was never remotely anything like pancreatic insufficiency or anything like I experienced throughout this whole experience. So 2019 in general, I would wake up in the middle of the night with cold sweats, and I would feel clammy and a little bit nauseous, and I would feel a little bit shaky. And I discovered the only thing that would fix that would be to have a bite or two of a protein bar. And this is something I brought up to my doctor, and I was testing my blood sugar through all of this to see if maybe it was getting high at night or low at night. And my blood sugar was typically fine, but these are symptoms of like hypoglycemia. And so my doctor and I just kind of came to the realization that, okay, we're not 100% sure why this is occurring, but the protein bar in the middle of the night is helping you, and then you're able to go back to sleep. So we're just going to like keep an eye on it. And so that was a big thing. Like, that is not normal to wake up with those symptoms and for it to all get better with eating some protein. And interestingly, I have not dealt with anything like that since my diagnosis and being prescribed digestive enzymes. And yeah, I haven't dealt with that since. In summer 2019, I started having stomach pain after eating certain foods, and I noticed it was foods that were harder to digest. So like whole grain bread could not, like, that just made my stomach hurt so much. And I started having just like random times every once and again of just like needing to run to the bathroom and go, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. Just like, oh, I needed like schedule an appointment with my GI doctor. And in September of 2019, I had surgery for something unrelated. It was a central line related surgery. And post-surgery, this is why I know for sure, like between September 2019 and March 2020, because it was literally documented. But in September, I had that surgery. And after that surgery, I just never fully recovered. That was when my energy really started going down, and that's when everything started happening with me being bedridden and unable to do things. This is also around the time where I really started needing to eat more than I was not, and my diet was pretty healthy. Like, I didn't eat a ton of sugar. I ate, basically everything you need, fats and protein and carbs and veggies and fruits, and it just felt like it was never enough, and I was just always eating. Like, it was honestly crazy. I also kept getting sick. Like, I kept getting sickness after sickness. It was just like one thing after another. And when I got the stomach bug, it was like around Thanksgiving 2019. That kind of messed up my system. And I was just noticing my stomach was more sensitive than usual. And there was some foods that were just going through me. But I was just like, I've had GI issues in the past. Sometimes I do have these one-off days where my stomach will just be more sensitive, and then it kind of goes away on its own. And I just thought it was one of those things that, the stomach bug just really hit my system really hard. That's why I'm more sensitive, and I just got to give it time. I'll book an appointment with my GI doctor to just make sure everything is good. I think it's honestly just my body and like Mido acting up, because again, I had dealt with stuff like that in the past where my stomach would be more sensitive sometimes and then it would get better. And so I made an appointment with my GI doctor, but he was booked out. So he was booked out till like mid to late March. And in February 2020 was when I really noticed my stools getting looser. And this was something I remember mentioning to my mom, just like, hey, like, I don't know, something's weird about this. But she and I both were like, well, we just got to wait for my doctor's appointment. Like, it's nothing crazy. It's just like, maybe there's something else going on. And then on March 1st, I did not tolerate anything I ate. And when I say that, like, I had toast and went through me. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just one of those sensitive days. I'll give it some time and try some food later. Maybe it's just like a fluke, weird thing. Maybe I thought I didn't tolerate my food, but it was just my body, being a little inconvenient with timing. And so I was like, okay, I'll have something really bland, like the Brat Diet bland. That went through me. And so everything went through me. And at that point, I'm like, okay, maybe I have like a stomach bug, because like the stomach bug was going around that time. And so I was like, okay, well, I have a central line for my other medical issues. Let's hook me up to IV fluids to at least keep me hydrated and go from there. And I just was like, okay, hopefully I sleep it off. So I wake up the next morning, and that entire night I was in the bathroom more than I wasn't. And I got to a point where I wasn't able to control my faculties. And that's when I knew something was really, really wrong. And I just had this gut feeling, no pun intended, I just had this gut feeling that something deeper was going on. And so I went into the ER, and because I've had GI issues in the past and other medical issues, I have had experience being placed on TPN, which is IV nutrition, and I did fine on that. So I knew that the doctors at the hospital I go to would probably be more than willing to put me on TPN so that I am getting nutrients while we try to figure out what's going on with my GI system. And so I head to the ER. That's what they do. They admit me. They start me on TPN the next day. And I got like an energy boost. I started feeling a little bit better. Shocker, because I was actually getting nutrition, because with TPN, it bypasses your GI system. So it doesn't have to be digested or anything. So I was feeling better, and the doctors were like, well, we think it's probably viral or bacterial. So they did stool tests for viral panels and bacterial panels, which both of those took a long time to get the results back. So in the meantime, I am there that entire week from March 2nd to March 6th, Monday to Friday. And at the end of that visit, I started seeming like, hey, I was tolerating food again. It wasn't going through me. I had eaten like 2 meals and I was good and dandy. And the doctors were like, okay, let's wean you off of TPN and send you home. I should have never been sent home, because let me tell you, it wasn't that I tolerated the food. It's that I had gut dysmotility act up, and all of that undigested food was sitting in my stomach. And over that weekend at home, I got so much worse and so much weaker, and my symptoms going to the bathroom got like 10 times more intense and worse. And it was to the point where I was in pain, and incredibly uncomfortable. And then we got a call that everything was negative on the viral and bacterial panels. And at that point, my parents were like, yeah, we're taking you back to the hospital. You don't have anything. Like, we're taking you. So I go back. And the reason why I say they should not have discharged me is because at the beginning, I can't remember if it was that hospital stay or the immediate one after, where I literally go back after being home for 2 days. But a medical resident came to me and raised the alarm about my blood levels. So all of my vitamins were basically the lowest they could be. They were not in range at all. They were non-existent. My hemoglobin, all of my blood counts overall were really like abnormal. My hemoglobin was very low. I was very, very anemic. And my lab work screamed, hey, pay attention to this. This is not like a virus. But for whatever reason, the doctors just released me without really investigating it that first inpatient stay. But anyways, so I go back, literally home for 2 days. I go back to the hospital. I am in the hospital for the rest of the entire month of March into the second week of April. And this was in 2020. So I was in the hospital before, during, and after everything shut down around the world, which was a trip. Let me just say. So this is everything I went through. This is the Cliff Notes version, by the way. So I had several more viral and bacterial panel stool tests done and retests. I had literally every other stool test done under the sun. I had every lab work done under the sun. I had CT scans. I had multiple x-rays, multiple ultrasounds. Did I mention stool tests? Literally every day. I also had a colonoscopy and endoscopy, and they did not find anything on the scopes. However, I am glad that I ended up getting those done just for peace of mind, honestly, to make sure nothing else was going on. And so I'm glad I ended up doing that. And now this is something very few people know, actually. Very few people know in my life. At one point, they thought I had a rare small tumor in my GI tract that would explain all of my symptoms, and it would explain my blood counts, like my hemoglobin being low, my blood cells being funky. It would explain my anemia. And so that was a possible diagnosis that was truly investigated, and I had oncology and hematology involved, and at one point there was discussion over doing a possible, I think it was bone marrow biopsy. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's what it was called. I didn't end up having that done, but this was a diagnosis that was a possibility, and that was really scary. And my heart goes out to anyone who does have that diagnosis or has experienced that, because that was very scary. And thankfully that wasn't my diagnosis, but that was a whole thing. I also got 2 units of blood transfused to me. I got a couple of, I think 2 different iron infusions just because I was so anemic and so low on blood. I also was told by one doctor, oh, this is something I forgot to mention. So I lost almost 20 pounds unintentionally between September 2019 and March 2020. And so the reason why I mention this is because I was told by one doctor at one point that I had to lose more weight because my liver, I had a fatty liver. And because I had a fatty liver, that's what was causing every single one of my GI issues, which was not true whatsoever. I'm speaking for me and my body personally, no one else at all. For me, when something crazy is going on with my body and everything else is haywire, my liver always acts out. She just has a dramatic streak. But once I was diagnosed and everything settled down, my liver went back to where it was, and I don't have a fatty liver anymore. So that was something that went away without losing additional weight, might I just say. Also, I was tested for SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I did that test, which was like a 2-hour breath test. And I had to drink this weird drink. And that test proved to be inconclusive. And I was so upset at that. But I convinced them to put me on antibiotics anyways because I was desperate. I was so desperate for relief because I was in the bathroom constantly. I was crying every day. Eating anything was pure torture. And it was just so disgusting. It was so disgusting. And it got to a point where my medications were going through me and I wasn't absorbing them. Not going to tell you how I know that. I just found out the hard way. But that was really scary because my medications I'm on are obviously very important and it keeps everything else at bay. So if I wasn't tolerating those, clearly I wasn't doing good at all. If you couldn't tell by like literally everything I'm adding on to what I've already said. I went through it. So all of this happened like in a month and everything was shut down. So I was locked down basically in my hospital room for an entire month. The only time I would go out of my hospital room was for medical tests. And those became few and far between because the pandemic essentially made everyone panic. Obviously, we all know this. We all, experienced this. And so doctors didn't know what was essential, what wasn't essential regarding test results. And so that slowed things down. And it was just a whole experience on top of everything else. And it got to the point where I kind of realized that, hey, there's a huge possibility, and I discussed this with the doctors at the hospital, there's a huge possibility we don't find anything because we've tested for everything. We've done every test under the sun. No results are coming back showing anything wrong. And there's clearly something wrong. And so we got to a point where they were going to discharge me and send me home on TPN. And my diagnosis would just be malabsorption with no known cause. And I would just follow up with a GI doctor after discharge, which was not ideal because I didn't want to be passed around and have to redo all of the tests I already did and wait months and possibly years for an answer. But I reached the end of my rope and they reached the end of what they could do. Until one doctor came in one morning and said, "Hey, Haley, we've done 11,000 million bajillion stool tests on you, right? Yeah. So something about that is some of these stool test results won't be accurate if you're not eating a full meal, like having protein, carbs, and fats." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, you have to eat a full meal 3 times in one day to be able to get accurate results for those stool tests." And I said, not one solitary person told me that. So guess what happened? I did that. They then did the stool test. And guess what? The fecal elastase test that had been performed multiple times came back abnormal this time because I did it correctly. Sorry, I had to take a second there. So basically, the fecal elastase test then came back abnormal, which means if I was told this in the beginning, I could have been diagnosed within the first 1 to 2 weeks of my hospital stay instead of an entire month. Clearly, you can probably tell why it still angers me to this day. So that abnormal test result came back. And they were like, "Let's order you an MRCP." And that's when they found my pancreatic atrophy. And that's when I was diagnosed with pancreatic insufficiency caused by pancreatic atrophy. And I finally had an answer for the pain, the torture, the trauma, the grossness of it all. Now, when I got that diagnosis and was told that the answer for this diagnosis is to take digestive enzyme pills every time I eat something, I thought, that is wonderful. I have an answer. I have a medication to take. I can go back to normal. I can get off of TPN. I can go back to eating a normal diet. And I was so happy. I was so happy that things would return to how it was. I just knew now to avoid foods that are high in fat because that aggravates the pancreas. And I knew to avoid greasy foods because of the same reason. And I was like, great, wonderful. I'm so excited. And I wish it were that simple. I really do. But this is what I tell everyone when I talk about my pancreas issues. My pancreas is psychotic and has mood swings. And there's no rhyme or reason. There are things I do tolerate and things I don't tolerate, and there's things I tolerate half of the time and things I don't tolerate half of the time. There's no rhyme or reason for everything, and it has been a battle and a really long journey. I am still on TPN, but I am hoping to be weaned off one day, or to decrease the amount of hours I'm on TPN and decrease the amount of calories, because that is providing my additional nutrition. And I'm hopeful I'll get to that place and that I can continue to build up my diet to be able to eat everything I need to eat to maintain health and my nutritional levels. But it is a diagnosis that completely destroyed my relationship with food, and it destroyed my relationship with my body, and there's a lot of anxiety and trauma intertwined with it. And I have shared so much in this video, but it truly is the cliff notes of my diagnosis story. And I was lucky that I got that diagnosis before leaving the hospital, and that I, got a new GI doctor out of it, and that I was able to get on these digestive enzymes and to at least have some clue of how to deal with it. Even though a lot of the journey was very frustrating and still is, I am very grateful I got a diagnosis and I now know what's wrong with me. But it just took a lot to get here, to get to that diagnosis. And I do just want to give a special shout out to the medical resident who raised the red flag to me about my weight loss and about all of my blood work looking really bad. That is an interaction that I still remember. This resident was on their last rotation, literally on their last hour of this rotation, and she took the time to talk with me and treat me like a human being. And I still think about that interaction. So special shout out to her, and special shout out to all of the nurses, literally all of the nurses everywhere, but specifically the nurses that were with me throughout my hospital stay. You guys truly made it, and in a time where everything was terrifying for everyone, you really helped me when I had to spend my 19th birthday in the hospital. You helped me when I was terrified, and nurses are just wonderful, and the nurses I had were amazing and truly helped me throughout the entire experience in hospital stay. So I just had to give that special shout out to them. And a special shout out to my friends and family. Thank you for helping me literally survive and not go insane, because it was really, really hard some days. And it was really difficult to be talking with doctors and telling them that something was very wrong, and them just trying to say it was some bacterial or viral thing, which is what they kept saying for the first 3 weeks of my hospital stay, even though I knew that wasn't true. So, moral of the story: trust your own gut feeling. I should specify your own gut feeling. If you think that something's wrong, listen to it. Do not let doctors try to tell you otherwise. Also, you're not alone if you've experienced anything like this, or if you're in the throes of trying to get a diagnosis, or you're already diagnosed. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And this is a really difficult diagnosis, and it's really hard to deal with. So, with all of that said, I am going to close out this video, but like I said, I will be making an additional video talking about my day-to-day life now, what it looks like now, things that help me, and if you guys want, I can do a Q&A revolving around pancreatic insufficiency, so just let me know. But now, with all of that said, I'm going to go, and thank you guys so much for listening to this very, very long video, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.